Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nature Folklore Sessions. It's 24th of April, 2022. Glad you can join us. Well, here we go. Well, thank you very much for anyone who's managing to join us. And I've just this moment got stuff on the air, so give me a moment while I sort of twiddle a few things and get us started. As usual, on this beautiful sunny day here in Carracrory and warm too. Sorry I wasn't set up outside. It's been a little bit chaotic setting up today. In fact, it's getting more and more to the edge. I was switching things on about 2 seconds before I said hello to you. So I am inside. I'm looking forward to getting outside. And I appreciate those of you who, on this beautiful sunny warm day in Ireland, and hope it is with you, for joining us here on Nature Folklore, which, as usual, is our weekly time of exploring our nature centre folklore, connecting this within your favorite sanctuary space. I'm in the studio at the moment. I would have loved to have been in the tree sanctuary for this, but trust you are indulgent in your sanctuary space and within there and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, crafts, performance, and even problem solving. Now, today is it's part 4. It's the last of our permaculture series, Permaculture Living. Is Biodiversity Underworld part 2. And guest today, well, it's only one guest that we have today. And it's from a lovely studio interview here in Carracrory with the lovely Sarah Humble. So I'll feature that. That's our guest for today. And these Nature Folklore Session videos, tree sanctuary support, are all brought to you thanks to the support of you subscribers, the highly appreciated subscribers, especially right now, who contribute through Patreon, which is there, and also PayPal donators direct. And subscribers will be with us now or joining us a bit later on. So thank you very much for your constant support, because without it, I couldn't pay my subscriptions and be on the air to present this for you today. So that's fantastic. So let's see, talking of subscribers and everyone else, let's see which early birds are with us. There's one or two going here. There's Sherry, who's joined in. Good morning, and everyone from down East Coastal Maine. There's Gary, who should have a very good suntan at the moment. Hi, John and everyone. Glad to be here. It's been fantastic following Gary and family's pictures as they had a wonderful holiday vacation in Spain that he's just got back from. Fantastic. And John, hello, John. Terry Slack Hardwick from Maryland, USA. So thank you all. As I say, I've really had to rush to put this together because there's a lot going on. If you've read my Facebook post, you'll understand what's happening, what's going on. But I trust you will enjoy this. I haven't got as many photos as I would like today because I never got them all up. So let's see what we can get on with this. Now, I used to tie this biodiversity session. There used to be one session. Now, sorry, it's 2 sessions. I used to try and tie it in with the Biodiversity Week here in Ireland. But Biodiversity Week in Ireland is Friday the 13th to Sunday the 22nd of May. I know it's a bit more than a week. Well, that's great, isn't it? And I believe the World Biodiversity Day is actually on the 22nd of May as well, May the 22nd. And as I say, I usually try and tie this biodiversity coverage into these dates, but not this year. Now, actually, there's not much on the website. I haven't put the banner up. But anyway, I was going to put it up. It's biodiversityweek.ie, biodiversityweek.ie. If you can get that down, I'll put it in the comments after the show. And they haven't put up much yet, but there'll be a calendar of events. It's one of those sites that puts everything up about 3 days before it happens. A bit like myself, I suppose. So keep an eye. It's worth it. And for the International Day, that's actually a bit more technical. I wonder if I can take a moment to put the address in. It's quite a technical website, but it's worth having a look. And it has a strange address. Let's see if I can type it in. I think this is it. Right, we'll try that. This is what you look for. No, it hasn't come up. Oh, there it is. Right, that's it. There it is. That's the that's the Biodiversity Day. It's actually a Biodiversity Convention site, and you click the Biodiversity Convention when you get to that address. But that's the Biodiversity Day anyway. So to get going with what I can do today, as I say, I've got the one guest, and it's a lovely studio interview I had here. It's Cara Crory. Sarah Humble popped in and was sat next to me, and she'll see in a minute. And there was quite a long chat, so I split it into 5 videos. I've already shown you, I think, two of them, I think. So this is the third one. And it's a short clip of Sarah talking about her new involvement. She's, as well as going around the wells of Ireland and encouraging the communities to revive the wells, she's also now a director of the Gaelic Woodland project, which we featured in the tree series here. Now, I haven't set up a video in advance because I say I was panicking to get on the air. So give me a moment. I'll get this on. And we'll have Sarah for a few minutes talking about her involvement with the Gaelic Woodland project. So there should be a file somewhere here. That's not the one I want. Right, as I say, you'll have to give me a couple of seconds on this one. This looks like a good one. So here we go. We'll have Sarah Humble now for a few minutes. Director of the Gaelic Woodland project. How do you vision yourself in that? Where do you think you'll be moving in with that?
Well, I came across Owen Connaughton. I believe you had him on your show a couple of weeks ago, a few years ago, and this was still in the infancy. I've watched him for the last few years achieve lots of groundwork. He's got his charity status. He's very clear and direct about where they're going with things, and most of all, I think he's got an epic plan.
Mm-hmm.
As regards the reforestation, but isn't got his head in the clouds that, you know, unless we actually care for these spaces and face certain key issues like the amount of invasive species like the cherry laurel and the rhododendron, until we actually tackle those issues, there's no point in replanting. So we've communicated quite a bit over the years. You know, trees are not my expertise. But I suppose there is it's an ecosystem, isn't it? You know,
this is why we're saying trees in water, because you wouldn't have trees unless they sucked up the water, which is one of their most benefits. Because even he talked about that, the trees along the Boyne. Unfortunately, I know some people who've got farm there who are already well up on that, and it's working so well for the farm. But Owen was fantastic because it was interesting, the differences, because people that I talk to on projects, including myself, we're very much there with the fairies. It's all wonderfully and beautiful. What's Owen done? I mean, the first thing Owen done is make sure he's registered with everything properly. He's got proper registered charity. He's done all these bureaucratic foundations that scare us away because we're way with the fairies. We want to get in with the project. And there he is talking about having a woodland, a forest in the middle of Ireland, by Ushnik, in Mead. And the priority for him is getting those oaks in. And I said, well, that sounds typical because that describes the Gaelic Woodland project. You've got your roots down. You've got everything. Nobody's going to throw you off. Nobody's going to blow you away. You know, it's just his whole manner and how he went about it reminded me of the deep taproot of the oaks. And that's how he'd set up the Gaelic Woodland project.
He's not just looking to plant trees, he's looking to create thriving ecosystems.
Yes.
So I think that's why he's kindly offered me a place on his project, is because, you know, he is looking for a complete balanced ecosystem, and he understands that the water has a huge importance in helping everything flow.
Yeah, I get the impression that you're the the she factor, the fairy factor on it. You know, because he's so down to earth and so practical in everything that, and he does have vision. He does have connected vision. But, you know, come on, Sarah, bring the folklore. You're the folklore connection.
I totally cannot take credit for that. Owen on his own is a complete fairy, and he has put together an amazing, unique, skilled team that each has their own attributes. So, you know, I see him branching out, and you know, his project being able to support us as something that binds all these very, very interesting skill sets. So, you know, I couldn't take credit for that now, in truth be told. But thank you, John.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Right, there's just a couple of minutes there. We will have Sarah back with a couple more clips when I do the short water series at the end of May. We've got Women and Water, which I'll probably play both of the clips in that. And Sarah's offered to come on live talking about wells when we do the well section. So anyway, to carry on with the rest of what I have for you today, which I hope you'll find exciting. It's actually a bit different to what I had planned to do. So I hope you'll trust you'll enjoy this. I didn't show you the picture. That's the Ireland Biodiversity Week logo that you'll find if you go to the website there, biodiversityweek.ie. Now, I think a couple of other people have come on board, trying to find your comments here. There we go. Sharon McNichol has come on board from the Cairngorms. Lovely to have you along, Sharon. Thanks you very much. Now, in Facebook, there was a comment, and this is what steered me into a different direction with what I attended today. It was posted by a regular nature folklore viewer, Lama Davis, and that's him there. And he's not on board yet. He usually comes in through the YouTube if he's watching in. I didn't tell him I was going to talk about this either, so that could have got his interest. Anyway, what he posted, it was a quote from the late Malidoma Patrice Sommet. And I did have a picture of Patrice, who's kindly disappeared, unfortunately, just to show you who he is. I might have one further down here. I have a lovely picture of him anyway. No, there he is. There he is down there. That's a picture of unfortunately, the late Malidoma. He passed away last year, but there's a lot of relevance with what he said. And I know he's very popular with people in many parts of North America. Now, this posting that Lama did, it got my attention, as it says in a few lines, what I may have attempted to speak about over 3 or 4 hours of nature folklore here. And this is a quote from the Malidoma, and it goes, the elements of nature, especially trees and plants, are the most intelligent beings because they do not need words to communicate. They live closer to the meaning behind language. Now, the next most intelligent species are the animals because they use the minimum of uttered communication. So their language is closer to the source, which is the world of intrinsic meaning. Now, the last in the hierarchy, guess who? It's the human species, who must rely on words to communicate. And words are but a remote reflection of meaning, like the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave. Now, wise men and women in indigenous they argue that humans are cursed by their language. Here's an example there from Duolingo. Cursed by the language that they possess, and the language ends up possessing them. And language, they insist, is an instrument of distance from meaning. But with humans, they feel it's an unfortunate necessity because we can't live without it. At the same time, language is something that's very hard to live with. So that was Malidoma's interpretation. And for me, this is some personal validation to me of why I've grown when people respond to what I may say or post. And the things to respond with is things like, show me the facts, do your research. I want the truth, that sort of thing. You know the stuff. Follow the science. That's another one, isn't it? Now, for me, I always interpret such a statement as, oh dear, it's a disconnect from life, from vision, from meaning. And so I don't usually attempt to answer back those sort of comments because I usually don't have a clue of how or where to plug into people who might make that statement. Sorry, a bit soapboxy again, but from that quote from Lama, I'm going to talk a few minutes about suggested space, place, and purpose of ritual. I bet you didn't see that one coming for biodiversity. Anyway, within the practice of permacultural living, I'm going to apply the ideas of ritual. And funnily enough, I'm going to take what is taught by Malidoma from indigenous West African tribes and actually illustrate it in a permaculture living kind of understanding, maybe, and how it could be have a purpose in that lifestyle that people involved in permaculture may not even be thinking about. So along with inspiration, interpretation, and guidance, probably from the entities who remember the startup of Findhorn, when they came along, they said that Pan did everything for them. It was Pan that looked after the gardens. It was Pan that brought them the big cabbages. So yeah, there's a lot of permaculture people that kind of focused on the entities rather than looking up a YouTube or reading a book. So it's probably from entities that we vision and trust the inner earth, and the inner earth is where we plant stuff, and that's where it grows, of course. So this inner earth entity, we might describe these as goddess or some unseen spirit. I've got the goddess behind me here, or something that we feel passionately connected to. Let's bring that earth goddess up front here. There she is. That's it. I'll get rid of me for a few seconds. I've lost it. Right. Now, from the earth, in one way or another, the goddess, the she, etc., is where our beliefs, faith, and even our practices seem to be sourced from. Now, some of what I'm about to share now is actually, it comes from, it's inspired or it's direct from the voice of Sibonfu Some, who was actually, she was an arranged wife to Malidoma. And together they served some wonderful work around the world. Marvelous couple. So that's that. That's the only picture I could get of them together. So sorry, that's a little bit vague. But Sibonfu could be described as a healer of medicine. And she's of the Dagara people of Burkina Faso. I probably said that wrong. Burkina Faso, is that right? West Africa. And there are video clips of Sibonfu's talk on cultural survival. It's on the Cultural Survival website. I might have something here. No, I didn't put it up. It's cs.org. So I'll try and put that up. And you can get to see some videos of cs.org. I've got some strange addresses today, haven't I? And so there you go. Find out some videos of Sibonfu's talks. That's there. Right. Move along and see what she has to say. Because I got a few pictures on this. And now Sibonfu and Malidoma Patrice, they became quite well known, as I say. They're the terrific teachers. They did workshops and conferences. And they brought indigenous African folklore and traditions into the Western translation through their lectures, books, and retreats. And interestingly, they took some of the West back to the tribal people so they could have a communication, maybe fair trading, that type of thing. So they kind of were a platform in two ways. In fact, Lama was telling me that when Malidoma went back to his own tribe, he hadn't gone through his initiation, which I'm going to talk about later. And he found that initiation very tough because he'd already adopted Western ways. For a start, he went to university. So what I was talking about, do your research and so forth, that's what he was doing in the midst of all this tribal upbringing. Anyway, where Sabampu and Malodoma were raised, the homes were built, they still are, built with mud, and they're polished off with a mix of cow dung and ash on the outside. And I think I've got a bit of a picture of that. No, I don't have. It hasn't come up. Oh, yeah, this is an outsider one. Very pretty, isn't it? But you can be fascinated with what's in there. There's a Toga home that someone posted on Facebook. Look at that, with all those different compartments in there. I find that fascinating. Whether the Dagara have anything similar to that, but just shows you something about the approach that African tribes have on their homes, which is quite a bit different to us, although we're sort of moving towards that. I think we're moving a bit more on that. There we go. Anyway, so within these homes, the children have their own rooms, the woman has her own room, and the man has his own room. And there's actually another room that's a sacred space for the man and woman to come together. Now, when a woman becomes pregnant, the family members actually gather together and what they call a hearing ritual. And the purpose of that hearing ritual is to listen to the womb and the baby that's creating within the womb. So they all have a listen. And the reason for that listening ritual is to find out who is in that womb. What is that child? Why is it going to be born in the first place? And when it's born, what's its purpose? How is it going to live? They coming together with this ritual, the tribes people, the family, they're actually getting inspired just by the sounds in the womb of what this growing person is. And I suppose we do the same when we actually plant something in the garden. If it's a cabbage or a carrot and so forth, we've got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. But for some reason, we get a sense of what's going to come up. Are a carrot's going to be long and fat? Or are they going to be small and bally? We somehow get a sense of that when we sow. So this is what the living family of the tribe, of the family of the person that's pregnant, they're preparing space for the newborn person. And from all that inspired information that they get from the womb, they actually come together and decide on a child's name. And that is the name that's actually given, that's decided in council from that ritual, from the birthing ritual. And that name is actually given to a child. It takes 4 weeks for a girl. After a girl is born, they have a ritual of name giving. And with a boy, it's a week earlier. It's 3 weeks after birth. So this means that the child it takes a few weeks before the child is actually given that name. But then there's another ritual when the child is 5 years old. And what happens then is the child then it becomes owned by the name. The child carries the name up to 5 years old, like we carry our name. But from 5 years old on, the name itself becomes an entity, excuse me, that is actually guiding the child. So that's another rites of passage. And the name becomes the guiding entity, as I say. It becomes the energy, the life force. And the name is said to mentor the child into their adulthood and for the rest of life. Now, Subomfu's own name, it translates as keeper of rituals. It's also can translate in English out to the keeper of knowledge. And that was what she was born to live. And here's another picture of Subomfu, a lovely one there of herself. Now, with Ireland, we're not too far removed from that. We are removed from it now. But if you go into the folklore traditions, go way back. Think of the name Breda or Bridget as keepers of the flame. That's one example. And I certainly know from my years in Scotland, the women there are still regarded by the name of what they do, where they live, who they are. And certainly in Wales, that's very much a tradition as well. So it's not unique to the African, but did it actually come over from African immigrants from thousands of years ago? Anyway, a child into most tribes of African countries, they find they're actually born into a life of rituals. And if you think about it, before we had any books, before we had any scribing, how did we live? It was through rituals based on the folklore from our entities and so forth. So in these tribal traditions, it's said that you're either doing a ritual, thinking about getting into a ritual, or you're actually in the middle of one, or you've just finished one. So it's a constant life of rituals rather than watching. I suppose each time you watch a YouTube, that's the replacement for one of these rituals. Now, the purpose of ritual, they believe, is to connect us into the collective spirit. And you probably got your own name for that, such as God, Goddess, or she. And this connection through ritual or connection to a village, the council of the village, either in the spirit of mediation, it all has a purpose of attempting to mend whatever we think is broken in our life. Now, it's believed that through ritual or council, resurrect and regenerate the disconnections that's happened to ourselves and then continue our path. So the broken connections within our lives come together and we continue our path with much more balance. And sometimes it needs a council and mediation to do this. So ritual is regarded by Africans as nourishment. It's nourishment for their soul, just as much as food is to our physical body. When we're all over the place and seem disconnected, what do a lot of us do, especially in Ireland? We go and have a cup of tea. And that's a sort of ritual. Somehow we pause and it all comes back together again. Or go and sit in our sanctuary space, of course, and see what comes up, as I say at the beginning. So I think you can visualize a bit where I'm going with this. I'm talking about African rituals, but if your inspiration is worrying, I think you might see where I'm actually going with this as part of permaculture living. Now, in the Gara tribe of the Burkina Faso country, the healing medicine tradition is similar to any other indigenous tradition anywhere in the on this earth. There's a consideration for the spiritual plane, consideration for the sort of logics of our mind, and also the preservation and listening to our soul. And there is also that recognition of the seen world and what's around us and paying attention to it and being present, and also the unseen world, and that's where we get our entities, etc. A healing medicine person has to tap into all of this together. But the process always starts with the spiritual realm. Now, even conflicts to African tribes is very important. A conflict with people is regarded there as an illness, and it requires healing and medicine. Now, the reason is that ourselves and the other people and other life forms that we're in conflict with, even the cat, kick the cat out the door, conflict, we all have to share the same world, regardless. So we've got to deal with that conflict. So the healing process is to learn to know the person or the life form that's in your conflict. We've got to know them better so that we actually get on and share this earth together, of course. Now, within several African traditions, conflict is actually regarded as a gift. It's regarded as a gift to us from the spirits that's designed to bring two or more people where there's friction to actually bring them more into communication or into communion. So conflicts are said to not be with our enemy. We visualize, we blame the enemy, don't we? But conflicts by the healer is regarded as a stubborn refusal for us to personally deal with the conflict. Now, this was a subject that Subomfu's husband, Malidoma, used to teach. So if any of you watching went to Malidoma's whatever he had and whatever he hosted, you might be familiar with that. But, Malidoma's homeland, his name actually translates. Do I have a picture of him again? Let's bring another nice picture up of him. His actual name, when it was given to him, and of course the name that became his guide, is friend of the enemy or stranger. So that's what he's named after. So you can understand why he comes up with that a bit. Anyway, him and his wife, both of them taught how a lot of illnesses that we suffer actually comes from some form of conflict. Now, those conflicts can be of feeling rejected by the people that we love the most, or feeling that we're just never good enough. We just can't do things right. And the other thing is pretending to be somebody that we're not. we get this in modern social media, don't we? With the influencers, there's a lot of talk about you're either with or against influencers. You get fed up with them or you follow them along. But those influencers, they urge us to consume and consume more. That's their job. But often to do that, they have to be something that they're not in order to be consumable success. So let's see what you're saying at the moment while I ramble on here. Sharon Nickel from the Cairngorms, I think she said here, who's here. And then someone's leaving, I think. Unexpected visitor. Right. So that's on a beautiful day like that. I'm not surprised. So looking forward to when you watch later, which is what most people seem to do, which is fabulous. But it's nice to have the chat from you live as well. So appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much for those of you who are here with this. Now, Subonfu, she used to explain that the Dagara tradition, the healers, what they first do, the first thing they do when we come together with them is they watch how we walk. And I must apologize for the rest of this. I was rushing to put photographs up, and I just came on a few seconds after I was putting photos up. So for a little while, I haven't got any photos to validate what I'm doing, but I do have some on another subject. The next subject I'm going to come up with, you're going to see lots of photos. So excuse the rest of this little bit being without photos. But anyway, I'll try and explain it without pictures and let your imagination wander. But Subonfu used to explain that the Dagara tradition healers, what they first do is watch how we walk. They want to see how our body moves. And from walking, they can actually identify whether our body is actually ready to deal with the healing or whether we're over stubborn and still in conflict. Now, another huge healing medicine is actually encouraging and sustaining community connection. So it's not just the healer and the client situation, the whole community is brought into this because they believe that if someone comes down with an illness, it's not interpreted as just being a single person's illness, not a single person's problem, but it's a problem that has developed within the community. So an ill person is actually regarded as a voice of the health of the whole community. So the whole community is asked to step on the plate to help the ill person to get broken, to break away from whatever it is they are carrying. Now, can you relate that to permaculture living? You can approach your garden in two ways. You can do your neat rows, that type of gardening, and be very organic. And you're concerned if you're putting carrots in, your thought is on you're going to get a good crop of carrots, the same if you've got the cabbages in and the herbs and so forth. But with permaculture living is how is that you're planting or sowing? How does that relate to the whole surroundings in your garden? And if something becomes ill in the garden, how does that relate to the health of everything in the garden? You know, you might have one thing that's gone ill, but don't think it's just that one thing in the garden. There's something going on in the garden that has to be attended to. So that's how I interpret that. You know, that's an African tradition that I'm translating back into permaculture living. So if a vegetable, fruit, or plant or tree is having a challenge surviving, the approach is to observe and work with the whole garden to deal with that. So that's just like thinking about the Underworld network. We're all, a lot of us now, fascinated by the researchers, the scientists. I'll be talking a bit about them shortly, but how they talk about the Underworld network that's talking to each other, all the roots and the fungi all talking to each other and looking after themselves, all as a community. If something is going wrong underground, then Susan Stimac and these other researchers are saying that the rest of the underground life force and plants, they all come together to help out the one that's struggling. When actually above ground, this is not totally in our hands. You know, we're just one of the living things on this hand. So we're really a component of the healing process of everything around us, and especially in our permaculture garden and in the woodland as well. Now, Subonfu also taught, now this would be a big thing, I know with our regular viewers, Subonfu taught how ancestors are very much part of our everyday life, and they must never, ever be excluded. Because whatever is happening in our lives, they believe that our ancestors need to be part of it. So when we go through challenges, local Indigenous people may say, "Did you ask your ancestors for help?" And if we really think about our ancestors, how many times do we actually really employ them? Excuse me, I'm just going to adjust something here. So yeah, how do we employ our ancestors? Now, before even considering that, how do we interpret who our ancestors are? What are our ancestors? How do they come to us? Perhaps the most immediate response is memories from recently passed family elders. When someone's recently passed on, their memories are with us every waking moment. And I think when our parents go, no matter what age you are, you think of them every day. It's quite stunning. I know with myself, my mother passed away when she was 4, but there's not a day goes past without me thinking about something about her. So we remember from our own relations that have passed away, and we can get into situations, and I do this, I suppose, even with my mother and even a couple of uncles. We remember being in situations, or them being in situations similar to what we are at the present. So what do? We think, now, what would Auntie Min have done at this moment? How many of you can relate to that? You know, you're in a situation that needs a choice. Do you call on the memory of one of your family ancestors? What would they have done in this situation? So we do call on the ancestors, whether we realize it or not. Now, other people, they go deeper into this, and I've been involved in this type of tourism in Ireland, of course, and it's where people go off on pilgrimages to places that they know or believe are the spirits of their distant past ancestors live. It can start from the great grandmothers and fathers and going way back into ancient time. Now, for many of us humans, we actually go looking for buildings, don't we? We look for ruins and remains of old cottages, and then we like going deeper to find graves and ancient stone structures, such as churches, graveyard headstones, all of this to try and accomplish an ancestral connection. Now, with many Indigenous people, and I've been talking about this over previous weeks, they look to a river. They look to the river, a lake, and also a woodland and individual trees. And that's where they connect with their ancestry. Now, through ritual, many humans contemplate with the use of prayer. I think most of us do that, or sing, chant, or drum call, bang the drum, and use these tools to call upon the spirits of our ancestors. So it enables us, or enables the ancestors, we believe, to be with us at whatever place or space we may be in at any time. And especially if we go back to an old cottage or a grave of a past ancestor, the one thing we want to do, because we might not have immediate memories, is trying to call their spirits to us and see if the memories are present that inspire us and connect us. So I'll see what you're saying with that. I'll take a little pause for a moment, see if you made any comments of that. Yes, it's a beautiful as Adrian, who's out there visiting his ancestors in the garden. Thank you, Adrian. And meanwhile, Little Wing has joined us from Manchester. I'm sure you'll enjoy the beginning. If you go back, we've got Sarah Humble that we had. So great that you're with us. Thanks very much. Now, many human people may believe this whole ancestor thing is complete hogwash. And I get this a lot. But personally, I believe the different entities we call upon as the presence of our ancestors, they've got one thing in common. The rituals of calling up ancestors, even if this is just a simple prayer, it causes us to pause. Whatever we do in a ritual, it's a pause, isn't it? And there's a pause that's calling us to pause, contemplate. Whoa, a minute. It's a smell the roses moment. And I think that pause and the visions that come to us from such a pause can be extremely healing. And I mentioned earlier about the idea of, we'll just sit down and have a cup of tea. It's amazing the thoughts and visions that come to you when you do that. But with permaculture living, our approach to the land can and perhaps should be very similar. It needs contemplating pauses rather than just working it the whole time. And also, rather, people in permaculture, they go to courses, what they do is like a technical drawing course. Get beyond the measuring and planning that we may apply to control and create a garden. Permaculture is not just drawing stuff. I mean, that's great for when you draw stuff, even when you doodle. It's amazing what the ideas that come up. But even, I suppose, if you've got rulers and pens and protractors, that type of stuff, when you're drawing stuff, maybe the inspirations do come, but don't rely just on the stuff that you put down on paper. I think there's a message there. Frequently stopping to pause and relate to everything, it's wonderful. And that's where we're getting beyond language. That's where we're getting beyond worded language. It's sensing. And perhaps if I was a bit of a guru type, we'd stop for 5 minutes just now. But that's kind of ordering you to have a 5-minute pause. But once, it's not that kind of show. Maybe I should do 1 or 2 meditation quiet moment shows. Anyway, one study that currently seems to be of dynamic interest, as I've mentioned, is the underground plants talking to each other. And in the study of plants, we're talking about their sensory abilities like ourselves, but plants and trees that don't have a central brain. So there's another theory that's going around rapidly at the moment, is that with trees especially and other plants, the whole plant is a brain. They don't have a brain inserted with them. They are the brain. And to me, this is much of what we've been interpreting as entities and possibly as ancestors for thousands of years. That's my belief. But we talk about the sidhe, the fairies, the nymphs, the sprites as being in trees, being in water. And that helps us to trigger off our inspirations and guidance of our ancestors in the same way that the Dagara tribe there have their names that they're given at 5 years old, that is their entity that's guiding them. Now, the one thing is, not all ancestors are going to be peace and love. Some people believe that that's what we convert into. And what if we called on an ancestor that was actually a murderer or a torturer? What if we dared to do that? Actually, most of us, especially watching here, I bet we try to avoid calling on such spirit because we don't want that negativity and abuse entities around us. A lot of, I suppose, white kinfolk's traditions is putting out various plants and trees to protect the home from such entities from entering. And I do talk about that through other nature folklore sessions. But with these indigenous cultures, those entities that were really nasty, barbaric, cruel on Earth, they actually regard them as being very important because they're going to come, and we come across people in our lives, in our community, an angry person that has done some actions of cruelty, assault, murder, some really nasty stuff. You know, and what we want to do is lock that person up, don't we? Just get rid of the problem. Just lock it up. And of course, that problem is still in that container. So with these African tribes, it's believed that calling on a spirit of a person that lived that barbaric, nasty, cruel way, call on that spirit from the past who's similar, and that creates a bonded understanding and a sense of channel of therapy and medicine that can be used with the current living person. Now, what they do believe in is that when a barbaric and a cruel entity does pass to the other side as an ancestor, they are able to see clearly what was cruel. So they end up becoming a bit of a mentor. That's what these tribes believe. So by the guidance of this type of rough ancestor, they take that as being a guide of how to cure the people live in their community that have that attitude. And surprisingly, they have come up with amazing success with this, where a kind of cruel, murdering, assaulting person has suddenly become a balanced and a very much a person of the community. It's actually been quite amazing as far as a healing approach. And me being a pacifist I am, I find that the idea of mediation, having a council with mediator, and the approach of retribution decided from that council is much more preferred, because I don't like the barbaric confining punishment system that we have. I feel that you cannot dump people and build a wall and a container around them and the problem will go away. It doesn't. And Sobonfu, being born with that name that translates as keeper of rituals, talks about many types of rituals, and that's one of them. But to me, to talk about more rituals she talks about, it's going to go too far away from permaculture living that I'm trying to hold some sort of link to here. So briefly, many rituals are about actions to be aware of, and to be aware of the medicine that we need when our actions are breaking things up. So in order to keep our spirit attuned and cleansed, which is so essential in the practice of permaculture, one ritual that fascinates me, and I bring this up when I talk about the Om. I talk about the Om as using it as prompts through the rites of passage of our lives. My Om, A Tale of the Trees is about that. Now, as teenagers, most of us seem to go through a phase of feeling our individuality is so strong, but there's a sense of insecurity, because really we're developing our individuality, and that's a kind of a bit of selfishness, isn't it? And when we get selfish, we get insecure. So part of our teenage spirit is fighting to gain our own authenticity and our place in the community and our place in the world. So the indigenous elders, when they see this with a child, teenager in their community, they decide, okay, this child is now ready to become an adult. So, of course, the big ritual that's about to take place is that of initiation. It's like a metamorphosis, isn't it? The metamorphosis from child to adult and into becoming a being of more personal responsibilities and more union with the community at the same time. Now, this initiation in these tribal groups, it requires having a mentor, having a senior as a mentor. And going through initiation is like having someone, come on, break up our life into thousands of pieces, throwing it all up in the air. There's no way we can catch it and contain it. And then the, excuse me, the mentor and instructor will say, now, make your journey to find those pieces again and put them back together. How the teenager reconstructs him or herself through this, bringing everything back together initiation, will create a totally different person to how the person was before as a child or a teenager. And the role of the mentor at that point is to guide that apprentice. Let's say that teenager is apprentice through an initiation. So that person is an apprentice student. The mentor then guides that student into putting everything back together, but encourages everything to come back together very differently. Now, this could take the mentoring path of saying, now, what if you try and put this piece here instead? What's going to happen? Wouldn't you think that'd be interesting? It's how fun it is exploring interesting and different things, isn't it? So that's, in a way, I think, how we practice permaculture. We don't follow exactly the same patterns on the ground year after year after year. After all, the weather on the same date each year is entirely different to the weather was on the same date the previous years. I know 2 years ago, this was a very cold, windy day, for instance. So initiation is not only within teenage years, we also realize major challenges throughout our lives after that major adulthood initiation. So initiations and mentors are here to help us always to follow into the next course of life. And if we don't follow the new course of living presented to us, then something in us just dies and the disconnect happens. So the purpose of initiation is really to get rid of old habits, let the old habits and ways die, and then we can fit on the new skin. which is always exciting. And we never want to put on that old skin again because it never fits us anymore anyway. So every permaculture cycle after our skin changing during every winter season is very different to the seasons past. So thank you, Sabonfu Somni. That's it was part her, part me for that inspiration of what I've just talked to you about. And Sabonfu was also very active, and this is a thing we're passionate about too, is bringing clean water to people, keeping the water clean, keeping the rivers and lochs and lakes, keeping them clean, and bringing that clean water to the people, and in her case, to the tribal villages. But sadly, Sabonfu passed away from a virus that came from bad water. It affected her immune system. She was gone. So very sad. So, well, I've been rambling there. Let's see whatever you've got going here. Sherry's come up with something. There is healing modality called body harmony that reads the way a person walks in order to find out what's wrong in the body. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks for bringing that recognition that there are practitioners who do that in various ways. So here's that. Right, let's get on to something with some pictures again. Planting by the moon. How about that? I'll get on with a bit of planting by the moon now, which is a very important part of the permaculture. So let's see what we're doing. Let's get, there we go. There's a picture for planting by the phases of the moon. Now, a moon month is made up of 4 quarters, as you probably know, over a 29-day cycle, 3 quarters of 7 days, and one of those quarters is 8 days. And here's a lovely moon cycle picture for you. I hope that's clear enough. It's got the 4, obviously. It's got the, you've got the full moon and new moon, and then top and bottom, the kind of beginning of the next quarters. Then you got the middling bit. So it's almost like the 8, or they say the 8 Celtic rituals of the year. But this is a month, the way it happens. Yeah, we can use this for gardening. It's very, very helpful, and it does work. It's simple and it's effective. And see that timeanddate.com, very important. That's where I get my records from, and I'll be talking about that as well. Now, other versions of moon gardening, and I have worked with this because I have worked with astrology and family involved with it. So it's concerned with applying the moon to signs of the zodiac positions of the stars. But that's a very different approach to what I'm going to talk to you about now. It's also a lot to learn and absorb, and practice. So, of course, I'm not going to do that for the last part of this show. Now, the first day of the first quarter is new moon. And let's have a new moon picture, just in case you don't know what a new moon is. And, of course, it's when the moon's not visible in the sky. And at this point, the strength of the moon's gravitational pull on the Earth is at its weakest. And the moon's pull increases from this low point through the first and second quarters. So by the end of the second quarter, which is the full moon, let's have full moon, of course. And it's also the start of the third quarter that goes on straight afterwards. And at this point, the gravitational pull is at its strongest. So as soon as I can get my next picture up, look at this lad. As soon as the third quarter begins after the full moon, the strength of the moon's pull then starts to fade as it's going through the third quarter. And so the moon keeps ebbing and fading through the third and fourth quarter, and we're back to the new moon again. Which, to remind, is the end of the fourth quarter. So that's when new moon time again, straight after the new moon, back to the first quarter. Now, important is the Earth's water table. And you'll appreciate this when you live by the sea, as I did quite a while, especially if you're living by for food. You're keeping a real good tab on the tides, and the spring tides of the full moon and new moon especially. And the Earth's water table responds to this never-ending rise and fall of the gravitational pull changes from the moon. Water rises at the moon's gravitational. When the gravitational pull of the moon is greatest, that pulls the water up. And when the gravitational pull decreases, the water table goes back down. Now, when the water table rises, it does exert upward pressure, and the moisture from beneath your garden compost, your soil and raised bed compost, it all rises. Also, most of us familiar, the tree sap rises then too. And this pull increases the concentration of moisture content right up through our growing beds. And understanding this is a great help to us, especially during periods of low rainfall during early summer. And with us, late April and May is where things really go dry. And that's where people start putting stuff out in the garden the most here. Now, most gardeners like to add homemade organic feeds, such as from seaweeds. Comfrey and nettle is also popular. And I think there's a seaweed feed going on there. That's right, they're draining water out of that seaweed. It's been soaking. Now, feeds and manure, they should be worked into the growing beds at the start of the moon's fourth quarter, which is just coming up to the new moon. So there you go. Start working it in as you're approaching the new moon. And as close to the first day of that fourth quarter as possible. So that's the halfway between the full moon and new moon. Now, the quarter before, through that third and fourth quarter, the water table, as I mentioned, after the full moon, I will not confuse you there. The water table is falling as we're going towards the new moon again. And this releases pressure through the growing beds and encourages more thorough and deeper absorption of any additions to the soil. So you put your feed in and you're pushing down your seaweed or whatever you've got, and that's encouraged to go deeper than at other times in the moon cycle. So choose the fourth quarter if you can. And feeds applied during this fourth quarter, they actually draw down a lot easier due to the drier soil. There isn't water there to kind of barrier the feed falling. It just goes right down. Now, the moon's final phase sees its pull on Earth diminishing to the lowest point, and the water table flows away with it, of course. Now, as the water table recedes, any feed and manure that you're applying will go way down into a deeper depth, and it encourages a much more wider dispersal. So that really helps the wider roots, of course. Now, seed sowing. Seed sowing, go for the first quarter, right after the new moon. Best time to do that. Why is that? Well, for the next 2 weeks, give or take a day, the moisture content in the soil is now starting to increase because the water table after the new moon is starting to rise again. And this will combine with has already been combined with the absorbed feeds that you put before the new moon. So these feeds are coming back up during this first quarter. And this encourages the germination and the slow, especially of slow developing seeds, carrots, parsnips, and enhances, if carrots and parsnips are a year old and they're gone. But if you don't perhaps not follow this moon thing and encourage the water to come up to them rather than pour water on them, which is far better if the water can come up, that enhances the survival and eventual yield that you're going to get straight after the fast growers, things like the cabbages, actually sow these at the start of the second quarter. There we go. There's more seeds. There we go. I've lost my cabbages. That's it. Plant cabbages. That's it. They are cabbage seeds. Anyway, start those on the second quarter. And the feeds, they should be added to the growing beds 10 to 15 days before sowing and planting out. So try and, you do the feeds before the new moon, you do the sowing afterwards. Try and make sure there's about 15 days between doing the two. And if you do that, your new arrivals will get the maximum benefit because of what you've done. So planting out, the other thing about planting out, it's a very traumatic experience for those seedlings and for those young plants. And I love this picture to relate to that. So let's deal with that. For the best results, insert your young plants, your cuttings, your saplings, put them in the soil at the start of the moon's second quarter, which is between the new moon and the full moon. And thanks to the rising water table, once you hit that time, the soil is already getting moister, and they'll keep doing that for another week as you approach the full moon. And this creates the ideal condition for supercharging the plants that you're putting in, and it really helps their development, and they feel immediately at home. Also, make sure when you do plant out that they're cool at the end of the day, because there's less evaporation then, and so there's greater moisture retention in the soil and around the roots who are trying to make themselves at home. Also, the increased pressure on the newly inserted plant roots, that's exerted by the rising water table as well, as the water comes up through your raised beds, through your beds. And when the water comes up, it increases sap flow, not only with the trees, but also in your plants. And that consequently means there's faster nutrient ingestion into your new sown out plants that's coming up from the soil. So all plant life is its strongest and pushing hard for survival at the end of the second quarter and the beginning of the third. And this is before and after the full moon. Now for pruning, the cutting back of plants, this is something of a consideration, and this is very valuable to observe the moon by pruning by the moon. Do this when the moon is in its fourth quarter, towards the new moon. Just as you're approaching the new moon, great time to do your pruning, because the closer to the new moon, the better, because you want the minimum sap loss. That's the purpose of that. So towards the end of the week, before a new moon, the sort of 7 days before the new moon, the water table's almost completely fallen. So the water is no longer exerting any upward pressure. So there's no sap coming up. So less sap discharging does mean there's less wounds from the surgical operations that you've done in your garden from all the snapping. I'm trying to find a picture to my second picture of that has taken a nosedive. Never mind. Now for harvesting root veggies to be stored, such as carrots, parsnips, and potatoes, you can do this very differently. You don't necessarily have to do this at dry time, because if you want to store stuff in the sand and so forth, do this towards the new moon. But if you want them straight from garden to fork, pick them towards the full moon. But the new moon, that's the time to pick up your carrots, parsnips, and potatoes, just as you're coming up to the new moon, because the water table is falling to its lowest level. And that means that when you pick up, you'll notice when you pick up the root vegetables, they're already quite dry, or they dry very quickly. And it's a natural drying state, and that's what you want. And the drier the root and tubers, when you pick them up out of the soil, the drier they are then, the less likely they are to go soft and they even rot in storage. For optimum results, when you harvest those veggies at the end of the day, and they're all looking very dry, put them immediately into storage. They'll stay there through winter and stay crispy, avoid evaporation, and be as close as they could be to when you actually pulled them up. And that's what you want, firm veggies in your storage. And that's all down to how you remove them from the soil. Anyway, as I was saying, if you want some fresh garden to food crops, straight onto the salad, that type of thing that you want to eat immediately, there's nothing better than your veggies and pulled at the time of full moon, or a few days either side, of course, because the water table is at its peak, pressure is pushing the moisture up, it's all going up into your veggies as well. They're at their most alive at that time. So getting the most of the sap at that time, all that flavor is getting into your veggies. So when you pull them, you'll find that when they're in the plate, they're the juiciest and most tasty of the entire moon cycle. Now, for harvesting above ground, the developed plants, cabbages, I was talking about pulling the roots and tubers up. But for things like cabbages, broccoli, cauliflowers, that type of thing, go for the second quarter, or maybe the end of the first quarter before the full moon, not immediately before the full moon, because the table is pushing high on the topsoil. Now, for harvesting fruit, I think that's a no-brainer. You pick them when they're ripe. As soon as they're ripe, pick the fruit. Don't worry about the moon too much. But you'll also find that if they are ripe, your fruit, soft fruit especially, if they are ripe at the time of the full moon, they are going to be the sweetest, freshest tasting fruit that you could pick through the entire moon cycle. But don't, if they're ripe, don't wait for that full moon. Otherwise, they'll be gone. The birds will have eaten them. Anyway, for all fruit harvesting, best to pick fruit anyway, no matter when it is in the moon cycle. Pick it in the cool of the evening. This avoids evaporation, ensures your fruit will be in its tip-top condition. Now, the upcoming, let's see, I've got a picture of this, the upcoming moon phases. I think I got this from Date and Time. Yeah, there we go. That's what's coming up. I'll give you the dates as they actually are. The new moon, the quarter moon, the third quarter moon, that was yesterday. The next new moon is 30th of April. And the first quarter, actually, it's 9th of May. The full moon is going to be 16th of May. And the next third quarter after yesterday is the 22nd of May. And as I say, I go to date.com. I like those for references. There's their moon phases for the Northern Hemisphere. And if you go to timeanddate.com, you see they got a table of moon phases for the year for your location. And you can even click to further details where you get a fantastic analysis of the moon positions at your location, where to observe the moon, a lot of extra information. Now, during this short series, I've referred to scientists like Suzanne Simard, Merlin Sheldrake, people like that who study the languages of plants. And I especially talked about them during the Food Sovereignty edition. And their popularity has been gained through their presentations about how trees and other plants talk to each other using mycorrhizal fungi. Now, this is fascinating. As we know, it's all about the underground network that we've humored into calling Wood Wide Web. And having talked about languages earlier in this session, this is also another subject that hums of this underground network. The underworld network talks to each other through a very wholesome natural language, is the best way I can describe it with words. And of course, this exists well beyond our notions and concepts of human communication. Now, see and feel this as being patterns of cycles, spirals, and waves. But even through using language words like I've just done, cycles, spirals, and waves, they're language words, human language words. It's limiting to what that really is. So learning about the language of trees, their social networks, and their own human makeup, I believe it forces us to rethink what our relationship with things are. And I often refer to how modern languages are all about being focused on things. We wouldn't have the modern culture of influencers without the language and culture for things. For example, our social media influences is all about things, and they've got the language of things to talk about. So considering whole trees as being one whole memory bank or organ, or even one big brain, I assume that trees actually do respond to stress. And through reaction to stress, they can communicate that underground. So that kind of makes sense of talking to plants and talking to trees and hugging trees, doesn't it? So what happens to us when our senses, what happens to our senses when we know the plants can talk? Through reading and writing, we try to discipline ourselves. And through writing and reading, we're composing ourselves, organizing ourselves, especially me putting on this show. And through this, try to make sense of the earth, how we live, and survive among it all. So is there a way we could translate the most intimate moments that we get from reading and writing and sensing into communicating with the language of trees? We can to a certain degree, but if this was possible, we would truly connect with all the living world around us, wouldn't we, with that communication? So maybe a tree could not understand our words and sentences if we started talking to it, but it may well feel our voices, the vibrations from our voices, and how that changes. If we're happy, there's going to be a different vibration to if we're crying, angry. All of those have different vibrations. And I believe the tree and the plants do pick that up because that's the world of their communication. So to me, that's what the foundation of permaculture living is about. It's a journey of attempting that communication. It's not just having a garden to feed us. I think it's our way of learning communication with other life that is not humans or animals. It's that other life that is in the plant and the tree world. And of course, we take actions to enable a crop that's going to be our best possible nature-based food that we can get to feed us. But we also, I believe, in the permaculture lifestyle, we need to be physically and passionately active with the food and land and be involved with it, rather than just plan a harvest, and especially rather than just popping down the supermarket and getting stuff off of shelves. You don't have any connection with food that way, really. So I apologize if this series was a bit more ethereal than presenting hands-on permacultural practices. There's a lot of great channels on YouTube. Sorry, I haven't got a list of them. You might be able to put your favorites down in the comments. So I haven't been doing hands-on apprenticeship with permaculture living, and even if you can, get with other permaculture people, join the courses, the workshops, the retreats, and one or two of you might even have full-time jobs that are permaculture related. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and trusted this series. Sorry about the lack of photos today, but we've had some lovely guests through this permaculture series, through all 4 Sundays. And next Sunday, we go into the Belton season, and with all the lovely folklore, the rituals of that, and the sustainable actions that we can do through that time. So let's see if you've left me any comments on this. One more comment on this is even in the Bible, there are scriptures that say to talk to the land and the animals, but ask the animals and they will instruct you. Ask the birds are there and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and they will teach you. Let the fish or the sea inform you. Isn't that a lovely summary? Thank you very much for that as well. And Kate's come on board from Iowa here. Thanks very much. And Sharon found this interesting. Thank you very much for holding on. It was a little bit intimate today. As I say, I only had Sarah as well. I think there's someone else just popped on. Kate, yes. Vibrations and relationships are permaculture. So anyway, thank you. So say there's some stuff popping up here. And there's Adrian. We'll watch back. I'm sure you'll find it worthwhile, Adrian, and make comments as well as you do. It's fabulous. And thank you, people that are subscribing. I'll bring up the link if you want to go to the and help out considerably, buy me a coffee. I'm going to have to be doing a fundraiser anyway to help with some upcoming expenses. So excuse me to keep putting the begging bowl out. There's some serious issues coming up. But I'm going to stay on the air regardless anyway. Coming up, let's see. Folklore sessions, the bell. No, there we go. 1st of May. And that's going to be fun. That's next week. We're going to line up a bit for that, which is fabulous. What have we got? Pictures that don't come up. Oh, yeah, there we are. It went into a different place. This is the start. And It's the fun edition going through the traditions and customs of May Day. I know it's a church calendar day, May the 1st, but we'll have fun with that next Sunday. 8th of May, we're going into some more fun stuff, really to set off your imagination. If I can get to the appropriate picture for that, is the Ashlings and the Green Man. I've moved that because I think it's more appropriate for this belt and the time when we are sort of thinking about the fairies and the she more than any other time, maybe. So there's one for the men, one for the women, folklore of our intense desires and how they are unexpectedly revealed. So you'll find that I'll actually follow up from the May the 1st stuff that I talk about. But the climax of this is on the 15th of May, which, if I can find the fairy tree picture, there it is Fairy Stories for May. That's on the 15th of May in the middle. And that's going to include some lusty and romantic Hawthorne folklore for you. I won't tell you what's in the water, Little Water series, the end of May. I will leave that till next week and talk about that. Let's see, there's a little bit of computer mess up all of a sudden. There we go. There we go. Sherry, thank you, John. Fascinating. Thank you very much, Sherry. Thank you. There wasn't many today. I hope they'll be following up. With such a day like this, I'm not surprised. I'm looking forward to next week, of course, but thanks very much again to having a clip from Sarah Humble. That was lovely to kick off with. So if you're watching this broadcast later, which it looks like most of you will be, this series has actually been very popular with people watching later. Must admit, it's just been late watching has been very popular with this. So thank you for that. So, and keep your comments here if you're watching later, and I'll return from time to time to watch your comments. So there's the bells on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to that, tell you what's coming up next Sunday. So it leaves me to wish you having a fantastic, safe, enchanting, very highly inspired week. I think that's all I've got for you today. No more comments flying through. So until next Sunday, thank you. I'm actually finishing about 10 minutes earlier than usual. That's fabulous. We're getting back into form now. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us. And that's all from me today. Bye-bye. Thank you.